Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Simchak. I'm ESA's Director of Research and Programs, or good night if you are on the other side of the planet. Thank you for joining today's webinar on energy storage opportunities in India. This webinar is being recorded and will be available in the members section of energystorage.org. All those who registered will receive an email with links to the recording and slides by tomorrow. Questions can be submitted at any time throughout the webinar via the chat box in your browser, and we'll come to those after our speakers' remarks. Following the webinar, you'll receive a brief survey regarding today's topic and topics for future webinars. We definitely value your feedback to ensure ESA continues to provide the highest value information to you and your organization. All meetings and teleconferences of the Energy Storage Association are held in accordance with our antitrust guidelines. We ask that you abide by these guidelines during today's webinar. The full guidelines are available in the members area of the ESA website. If you are not yet an ESA member and would like more information, you can reach out to my colleague Richie O'Neill. Membership includes free access to all of our webinars, including those that are exclusively for members, among numerous other benefits. So please reach out to Richie for more information. Before we begin, I'd like to give you a brief update on upcoming ESA events. It's not too late to register for the 2019 ESA Storage Exchange, October 15th and 16th in Bellevue, Washington. That's next week. You can still make it, and you can still get there. Storage Exchange is an event designed to examine the steps necessary to successfully integrate an energy storage project and evaluate different ways companies are deploying storage to lower costs, reduce emissions, and establish a more resilient electric grid. You'll find registration, agenda, more info at the web address there on your screen, energystorage-events.org. I can also mention that Rahul, our speaker today, will be in attendance. So if you like what you heard today, you want to follow up with him, you'll be able to get him there in person next week. So I hope you all will be able to make it out to Bellevue with us. We've got a great webinar calendar through the remainder of the year. We've got one on energy storage and greenhouse gas mitigation on October 23rd. October 30th, we'll have our members-only town hall looking at policy and regulatory updates here in the U.S. November 6th, a webinar on long-duration energy storage applications. Further out, December 11th, we've got the quarterly update of the Energy Storage Monitor with Wood Mackenzie Power and Renewables, and that's another one only for ESA members. And we'll certainly have more to follow. And we're starting to look to our 2020 calendar too. So again, if you have topics that you'd love to see in an ESA webinar, certainly get in touch as we sketch that out for the first part of next year. Also worth mentioning, our effort to press forward on the U.S. investment tax credit for energy storage is ongoing. If we can be of assistance in terms of outreach material, talking points, sample tweets, all the rest, we've got a bunch of material up, energystorage.org/ITC, or you can drop us an email, silverline@energystorage.org. Or you can email me, education@energystorage.org, and we'll put you in touch. We're trying to keep that press up to make sure that we can get a ITC for standalone energy storage, because those of you who have been on our Wood Mackenzie Energy Storage Monitor calls have seen the great benefit that would have for storage deployments in the U.S. Let us know if we can help you there. But today, we'll be hearing about energy storage markets, policies, and opportunities in India. As the country develops its grid modernization programs and power sector transitions, there's really a lot of great potential opening up for energy storage to participate in those efforts. And there certainly seems like a lot of interest in what energy storage can offer. So joining us today to discuss key issues for storage in India is Rahul Walawalkar, President and Managing Director of Customized Energy Solutions India. After his remarks, we'll be opening up to audience Q&A. You can ask questions at any time via the chat box, and I'll be reading those out when we get to the Q&A session at the end. So thank you for attending today's webinar. Thank you, Rahul, for joining us. And I will turn over to Rahul. All yours.
Thank you very much, Tom. This is a pleasure to be doing a webinar for ESA. My journey in energy storage field started almost 15 years back at the ESA annual conference meeting in Toronto in 2005. So it's good to be back with the ESA community and sharing some of the insights on expanding the market and opportunities for energy storage and EVs in India. So first of all, I would also like to take this opportunity to wish all the attendees and ESA members belated World Energy Storage Day. As most of you know, 3 years back, ESA, IESA, CISA, China National Energy Storage Alliance, German Energy Storage Alliance, as well as Alliance for Rural Electrification together as part of Global Energy Storage Alliance decided to celebrate 22nd September as the World Energy Storage Day. So this was the third year of celebrating this day. So once again, belated Happy World Energy Storage Day. Now, this year is very special, particularly for India. We are, in fact, exactly celebrating 1 year of announcement from Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, where on last 2nd October 2018, he announced at the inauguration of the first assembly of International Solar Alliance in New Delhi that India is launching a national energy storage mission, and government is going to be focusing on demand creation, indigenous manufacturing, and innovation for energy storage. I have specific details about some of the steps and new details of the national mission, which is getting finally launched this year. But before that, obviously, a number of people have questions about the actual market potential. To start with, I'll share some of the latest numbers from the annual market report done by India Energy Storage Alliance. So right now, the Indian annual energy storage market for stationary energy storage is around 24 gigawatt hour. Now, these numbers may seem relatively high as compared to the numbers you see in US, where typically the energy storage market projections are done only for advanced energy storage technologies, whereas in India, we do include all type of energy storage technologies in our forecast, including some of the inverter and backup applications, which is the current dominating market in India. And we project that between now and 2026, there is a potential for somewhere around 270 to 365 gigawatt hour of cumulative potential. Where still behind the meter applications we expect will dominate, because the business case for behind the meter storage is very clear in terms of using it for reliability and power quality. At the same time, towards in a couple of years, we also expect a large-scale adoption for energy storage, for RE integration, grid support, also starting to pick up with support from government. So there are various policies which are going to support energy storage for especially RE integration, ancillary services, and right now in final approval stage. There is a Central Electricity Agency in India, which is similar to NERC in US, which has already come up with guidelines mandating 10% ramp rate control on any wind or solar farm which is above 100 megawatt. And in India, most of the solar and wind farms are getting built in this category in gigawatt scale. So there is a tremendous opportunity once these rules start getting implemented. There are also policies which are set up for managing forecasting errors for renewables, as well as mandating distribution utilities to manage their forecasting errors within a very narrow band. And there is a deviation settlement mechanism which is putting in financial penalties starting in March 2020. And already we are seeing a very strong interest from various distribution utilities in looking at 50 to 100 megawatt hour scale projects on the distribution level to help them mitigate some of the financial risk related to this. Right now, the market is getting driven by behind the meter. As I said, there is a huge market for what in India is called as inverters or UPS backups. And this market is going to continue to increase. There are both private as well as on the residential or small commercial industrial customers. But there are a number of segments which also present a huge opportunity with few institutional buyers, and we will talk specifically about telecom towers as one such market which has led the adoption of advanced energy storage in India, particularly with lithium-ion batteries. And we also have certain government agencies such as SECI, which stands for Solar Energy Corporation of India, National Thermal Power Corporations, as well as various state utilities. Each of them currently have already released tenders or are in process of releasing tenders for anywhere from few hundred to, in fact, gigawatt-hour scale tenders, which are expected to get implemented in 2020. So some of those tenders and early RFIs are already out. So if you are focused on India, you should be reviewing those and providing your feedback to the tendering authorities. Also this year, AES has deployed a 10 megawatt hour project for Tata Power in one of their substations in New Delhi. The project is owned by AES and Mitsubishi Corporation, and Tata Power is the host utility which is demonstrating and testing the energy storage for demonstrating various applications, including distribution upgrade deferral as well as providing grid support. And this is generating a lot of interest. From IESA, I would like to thank AES for their thought leadership in this area and actually putting a 10 megawatt scale project where actually seeing the project getting operated is generating a lot of confidence in arrival of energy storage amongst our regulators in India. India, in terms of renewable energy, traditionally has been a market driven by wind energy. In India, the wind energy project started getting deployed in early 90s, and currently there is more than 35 gigawatt of wind which is already installed on the grid. By 2022, this number is expected to get to 60 gigawatt, and by 2026-27, this number is expected to cross 100 gigawatt. In India, so similar to US, you have certain zones which are very good for wind energy resource. So there are around 6 or 7 states, starting from Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, where Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, where we have majority of the wind currently deployed. As you can see, Tamil Nadu, which is the southernmost state in India, has almost more than 40% of the current wind installations, followed by Gujarat. So there is a lot of opportunities for energy storage in the states to mitigate some of the challenges for integrating wind at the transmission level. Similarly, on solar side, India started the solar journey a little bit late. Maybe in 2011-12, India had just around 1 megawatt of grid-connected solar project, whereas now in less than 10 years, India has crossed more than 25 gigawatt of solar. And this is an amazing success story where number of people who doubt when Indian government announces some targets if they can meet. So to give you a quick background, in 2013, the central government in India announced a national solar mission where they set a target of getting to 20 gigawatt of solar by 2022. And most of the experts at that time believed that, if they're announcing 20 gigawatt, then maybe India can get to 10 gigawatt, because traditionally the Planning Commission of India had this track record of announcing ambitious goals for generation addition, but typically missing it by factor of 50%. But in 2014, after the current government took over, they actually decided to ramp up the goals, and they upgraded the target in 2014-2015 to 100 gigawatt by 2022. And already we have started to see that India is on path. There is some doubt if India will be able to meet those numbers in 2022, or it may be plus minus 1 year. Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, in fact, is confident that within next 3 years, they will be able to meet these goals or even exceed these goals, whereas some industry experts are suggesting that as we start getting closer to the 100 gigawatt penetration, we may see a little bit slowdown. But at the same time, the way solar industry is developing, solar has already become the cheapest energy source on the grid. In India, typically the average cost of energy procured is somewhere around 4 rupees, so which is slightly more than or closer to 6 cents US in terms of the energy cost, whereas the solar energy has been coming in for these large grid-scale solar projects. The price has been getting cleared at below 2 rupee 50 paise, so that is under 3.5 cents. So there is a big difference, and this is generating a lot of interest in issuing more and more solar tenders. And for next few years, India is expecting to release at least 10 gigawatt or larger solar tenders to try to ramp up in terms of the solar deployments in India. In terms of market players, wind, since the industry has been around for a long time, there is a very well established both manufacturing as well as project development sector available in India. Traditionally, the wind sector was dominated by people who were investing in wind for investment tax credits. But in recent years, we have seen emergence of large IPP players such as Renew Power, as well as some of the large other players such as Greenco, Mitra Energy, and others, each of them having now more than 1 gigawatt of wind projects commissioned. And there is a very strong manufacturing and support as well as financing structure available around that, which is getting also leveraged now for solar. There are a number of companies, particularly on the IPP side, who were traditionally on the solar on the wind side, have ended up also building a strong portfolio on solar. There are a number of EPC companies from India who have now actually entered the global space, particularly led by Sterling and Wilson, which is part of the Shapoorji Pallonji family. They have now become amongst the top 3 EPC companies in the world. And most of these companies have also starting to enter into the energy storage space. So most of these companies have converted their wind or solar teams as a hybrid renewable teams, with creating focus teams on energy storage as well. Similar to how we saw this development taking place in US with players like AES, Res America, NextEra, who were dominant players in the renewable field, realizing the need for energy storage and also making a separate name for themselves in these projects in US. We are also now seeing a strong interest from various technology companies to enter this market, and we are starting to see various partnerships getting formed in India for addressing this market. The third opportunity in India is related to the ancillary services, and this journey in India started towards the end of 2012 when there was a major outage in India which affected the northern and eastern grids, with a few 100 million people getting left without power for a few hours. So based on this, in 2013, Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, which is equivalent to FERC in US, issued a staff paper on ancillary services, basically need for ancillary services for improving the grid frequency. And since then, there has been a number of steps which have been taken to improve the grid discipline and introduce various ancillary services. So in 2017, CERC issued a staff paper on ancillary services, which also included mention about energy storage. Unfortunately, there is a very strong existing lobby which has been trying to first propose use of conventional resources. As the IESA, we have been trying to make a business case saying that we should not follow the developed countries in terms of how they first relied only on thermal or hydro assets for providing ancillary services, and towards last 5 years have realized energy storage can compete on providing ancillary services. We can actually open up in parallel. Unfortunately, given the very strong financial interest of existing thermal and hydro players, we are running maybe around 1.5 or 2 years behind schedule. We would have loved to get some of these ancillary service projects with energy storage getting bid out from 2018, whereas last 18 months we ended up doing certain pilots to see if thermal plants and hydro plants can meet the requirement. The good news is these pilots are already implemented, and the results are showing that some of the response times available from the conventional thermal plants or hydro plants is not sufficient to particularly meet high-value ancillary services such as frequency regulation. So based on this, we have again petitioned Central Electricity Regulatory Commission to include storage as a separate asset class and allow it to participate in ancillary market and compete with conventional resources, and they are very seriously considering it. So we expect in 2020 we will start seeing deployment of large-scale energy storage also for frequency regulation opportunities, which the POSOCO, which is the Central Transmission and System Operator, has put the requirement at around 4 gigawatt of frequency regulation assets required for balancing the grid. There is another existing market which sometimes get underplayed. In India, currently we have each year anywhere from 8 to 9 gigawatt of diesel gensets are sold in India, and this market is continuing to expand because of the increasing of grid penetration. As some of you may have followed the news, over last 2 years, Indian government has taken up a very ambitious program for expanding the grid, where in last 3 years almost 300 million new consumers were connected to the grid who never had access to the electric grid. Although now these wires have been laid out, there is still some financial issues with the distribution companies, and as a result the reliability is not available for 24/7, and as a result we are now seeing actually a big demand for backup solutions both for diesel genset as well as inverters and UPS solutions in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, whereas traditionally these demands were focused on larger cities where customers were expecting this 24/7 power availability. So we specifically believe that commercial and industrial customers is a very easy target for reducing diesel consumption. We are not proposing right now energy storage as a solution to completely eliminate diesel generators, but we believe that similar to US, where number of DG sets are used just for critical emergency backup for up to 60 or 100 hours in a year, India in next 3 to 5 years will start heading in that direction. Currently, there is more than 10% DG sets are being used for more than 500 hours per year, and we think with the reducing cost of energy storage, there is a relatively easy business case made where people can get easily 5 to 7 years payback for reducing their diesel consumption by deploying right type of energy storage solution. And particularly for some of the commercial or industrial customers who have sufficient rooftop space, if they can add solar plus storage, then actually the business case can be made within 3 to 5 years, because right now in India, the commercial and industrial customers pay the highest retail tariff for electricity. So just to give you comparison, a residential customer in India typically pays somewhere around 3 rupees to 6 rupees per kilowatt hour of energy, depending on the individual energy consumption. If it is less than 100 kilowatt hours per month, then they pay typically a rate of around 3 rupees, whereas if you are crossing 300 to 500 kilowatt hour consumption per month, then you start paying higher than 6 rupees as a rate. On the other hand side, industrial customers typically pay a tariff of somewhere between 6 to 8 rupees, whereas the commercial customers typically pay a tariff of 10 to 12 rupees, not accounting for demand charges. With solar prices coming down to 2.5, 3 rupees, or even in terms of a distributed scale at under megawatt scale, the prices are now coming close to 5 rupees. So there is a huge margin available for utilizing solar energy and using it with storage and using it to even actually reduce the purchases from the utility. In fact, as India is moving towards getting this 100 gigawatt solar, out of which 40 gigawatt is expected to come from rooftop solar, the distribution companies will be very much interested now in having storage deployed either as a community energy storage asset or at distribution level, because otherwise the biggest challenge for them is going to be a low peak load in the afternoon, similar to the California duck curve. We are calling it an Indian camel curve. And then having a quick ramp up in the evening, because typically most of the distribution utilities in India witness their peak loads between 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the evening. So if between say 11 a.m. to 3 or 4 p.m., if because of all this 40 gigawatt rooftop solar, if they have actually lower demand on the distribution grid, then this ramp up is going to create significant problem for these distribution utilities, not just technically, but also in terms of managing their cost of energy procurement, because they will have excess long-term contracts, whereas the demand during the day will go down. So I earlier referred to another market, which is telecom towers as a specific example. So to give you some numbers, currently there are close to 600,000 telecom towers currently operating in India. And typically these telecom towers have a load of anywhere from 1 to 5 kilowatt in terms of various transponders and other telecom equipment placed in these telecom towers. And more than 70% of these towers do have diesel generator and lead acid batteries as their primary backup solution. Means 100% towers do have backup in terms of lead acid batteries, but according to our estimates, somewhere around 60 to 70% telecom towers also rely on diesel power for supplementing the backup systems in case there are outages which are longer than few hours. Now, in 2-3 years back, we noticed a big change with companies like Reliance, which started a new telecom company called Reliance Jio, which has become one of the fastest growing telecom solution providers in the world. They actually had a strategic decision to deploy lithium-ion batteries, and by using that, they actually eliminated need of putting the diesel generator in most of their telecom towers. So they've already crossed around 150,000 telecom towers, which are mainly relying on lithium-ion batteries for their backup applications, and that itself has generated a demand for more than 2 gigawatt hour of lithium-ion batteries in India for single customer. And overall, Reliance Jio's share in terms of the telecom towers is around 30%, and we are now seeing in last 2 years other telecom operators such as Indus Towers and Bharti Infratel also now seriously considering deployment of advanced energy storage solutions in lieu of just relying on traditional VRLA lead acid batteries. And we expect this market to continue to grow because the number of telecom towers is going to increase. At the same time, with the newer lithium-ion batteries, the replacement cycle, which typically was 2 to 3 years, will get elongated to 3 to 5 years, and thus you will see some stagnation in terms of the overall size of the market, but the market is expected to be a major player for energy storage in coming years. The other opportunity in India, which is developing very fast, is on e-mobility and electric vehicles. And again, this is a market where, depending on how you look at the market, you may have completely contrasting thoughts about India. So on one side, if you're thinking about electric vehicles in form of vehicles like the Teslas or BMWs, then India is a very small market for that. Although in 2013, India has set up a national electric mobility mission plan, and this is actually now upgraded earlier this year for launching a national mission for transformative mobility, which includes a complete range of electric vehicles considered. But in the meanwhile, between last 5 years, we have already seen a tremendous growth of electric vehicles deployed in unorganized sectors, particularly e-rickshaws. If you are not familiar, e-rickshaws are typically three-wheelers. These are used for as a local commute or last mile commute by people for day-to-day travel, and they are available very widely. So India, there is a current estimates are somewhere around 600 to 700,000 e-rickshaws are already operating on the Indian roads. Most of them currently are using lead-acid batteries because that's a dominating technology in India. But given the demands of the driving range as well as some of the limitations of fast charging of conventional batteries, we are seeing that most of these e-rickshaw drivers end up replacing these lead-acid batteries in less than 9 months. And that's where there is an interest for both advanced lead-acid as well as lithium-ion batteries based solutions. Only thing which is missing is having some kind of a financing option being made available for these users. And if that happens, then we expect this market to play a very key role. The Indian government has also announced various policies such as FAME, faster adoption and manufacturing of electric vehicles, which is managed by Ministry of Heavy Industries. And under this program, there is already significant amount of money being made available for financing both personal as well as commercial vehicles such as buses, particularly for state-owned transportation companies. NITI Aayog, which is a central think tank for government, is driving this national mission for transformative mobility. And as part of that, there is also a plan for encouraging domestic manufacturing of batteries, which I'll cover towards the end of the presentation. There are various agencies who are working on different aspects of this, such as Ministry of Power is working on creating standards for EV charging. There is a Ministry for Road Transport and Highways who is enabling policies for creating incentives for people to switch to electric vehicles, such as having green license plates and reducing some of the road taxes. The Ministry of Urban Development is looking into this as part of Smart City Mission. The Department of Science and Technology is working on various R&D initiatives to help India meet the national mission targets. And then there is a Bureau of Indian Standards as well as agencies such as ARAI, Automotive Research Association of India, who are working on creating various standards for charging infrastructure as well as electric vehicles. So looking at the current scenarios for EV penetration as a base case as well as a base case scenario, we expect this market with taking at 2018 as a base year to be somewhere between 110 to 150 gigawatt hour by 2026. Obviously, there are targets being set right now under the new mission for transformative mobility, which could actually be take this market to much higher numbers. But right now, in our current scenario, we have not included some of the government targets because some of those policies are still getting finalized. But even without that, we expect the total demand to vary between 110 to 150 gigawatt hours. So if you see collectively between stationary and electric vehicles, we expect by cumulatively between now and 2025-26, EVs will account for at least one-third of the total demand for advanced energy storage technologies. And beyond 2025, actually, we expect the demand for EVs to grow much faster, particularly for four-wheeler and other segments, where we expect with the reducing prices of batteries, more and more people will start switching towards hybrids and electric vehicles. Apart from this, there is also tremendous opportunity for thermal storage, and particularly India is right now sort of going through the transition which maybe most of the cities in US went through in mid 1970s, where the adoption of air conditioning is now increasing very rapidly, and this is creating a lot of challenges for distribution utilities, because in certain cases suddenly now the peak demand is happening in summer days at late in the nights, or there is a various fluctuation between the peak demand towards the evening as well in the late nights in case of commercial and industrial demand for cooling. So India has also launched a big India cooling plan, and under that there is an expectation that there is almost like a 440 gigawatt worth of cooling requirement required for India. And there are policies getting set up for encouraging use of thermal storage for helping balancing this. There are a number of utilities who have introduced time-of-the-day tariff and special incentives for adopting thermal storage for HVAC applications. But also we are seeing tremendous growth for applications such as cold storage, because in India right now there are various statistics that 40 to 50% of agricultural produce get lost by the time it reaches the market. So there is a tremendous opportunity for deployment of thermal energy storage for applications such as cold storage or transportation vehicles for reducing again diesel consumption in these areas. Now coming to some of the specific government plans and incentives, earlier this year in the budget, government has actually introduced lower taxes for electric vehicles. So GST, which is a tax used in India to distribute revenues between central government and state government at the sale of any products or services, that had typically the GST rate for electric vehicles was at 28%. It was slashed down to 5% earlier this year, and that is itself is generating a very strong financial incentive and removing some of the barriers for this. Also, there is 100 billion Indian rupees are getting distributed under the FAME 2, which is the Faster Adoption and Manufacturing of Electric Vehicles program. And there are some additional benefits also being proposed, such as slashing the corporate tax rate and supporting R&D, which is expected to boost this sector. But coming to the specifics, what is most exciting right now is NITI Aayog is on verge of launching RFI for GIGA scale manufacturing plan. So I've included some slides of the current proposed plan. These are still in the getting finalized by the government, so the information in next few slides is only for your information. The official announcement and details of the program will be announced by the government shortly. So please use the next few slides with caution. These are indicative based on our understanding of the current plans, which are almost getting finalized. So under the National Mission for Transformative Mobility and Battery Manufacturing, India is expecting that we will have somewhere around 20% domestic value addition for these battery packs getting sold in India by 2020, and already we are seeing increased customs duty imposed for people who are directly importing complete battery packs versus importing cells and then assembling the ESS units or battery packs in India. Going forward, actually the expectation is by 2022 this value addition should get to 60 to 80%, and the goal is by 2024, 100% manufacturing should be possible in India. So it is not saying that India will be mandating 100% procurement from just domestic manufacturing. At the same time, they are trying to create incentives for at least part of the demand, which should be met by domestic manufacturing. And this is done because this is also being getting considered as one of the national energy security priorities, where similar to US or Europe, the way they have created policies for supporting domestic manufacturing, India also do not want to have 100% reliance on imported energy storage technologies because it could become very critical for both grid as well as transportation sector. So the National Mission for Transformative Mobility and Battery Storage was officially approved by Union Cabinet on 7th March, just before India went into a national election. So this mission is led by CEO of NITI Aayog, Mr. Amitabh Kant, and there are secretaries of various government ministries, including the Ministry of Road and Transport, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Department of Science Technology, Department of Heavy Industries, are all included as key members of this interministerial steering committee. They already had a series of consultations with ministries as well as industries in last few months, and based on that, the final cabinet approval is expected this month, ideally before India starts the Diwali celebrations in the last week of October. So we are expecting that this final approval for the mission is will be provided by the cabinet anytime now. So as part of this, you earlier saw the projections by IESA in terms of the market projection. The slide here is showing the market projections done by NITI Aayog with help of Rocky Mountain Institute and some of the other sources such as Bloomberg and others, where the conservative scenario, which is at the bottom table, they are expecting the demand between 2020 to 2030 or 10-year period to be around 655 gigawatt hour. And obviously the demand is increasing based on making energy storage more affordable as well as having the right policy support. Whereas in the base case scenario, the demand is almost double of that at around 1300 gigawatt hour. And for considering some of these baseline scenarios, you can see the assumptions which are made, where they are expecting by 2030 around 30% of the private cars and 70% of the commercial cars, which are typically getting driven more than 150 or 200 kilometers per day, will be converted to electric vehicles in terms of the year-on-year cell, not as a cumulative vehicles on ground. They're also expecting 40% of the buses, particularly the mass transit buses, will be electric by 2030, and 100% of two-wheelers and three-wheelers. In fact, there is a plan to make two-wheeler and three-wheeler market to completely go to electric by 2025, but they are getting some strong pushback from some of the domestic and international manufacturers who are present in India. So, but definitely by 2030, the expectation is that 100% of any new two-wheelers and three-wheelers getting sold in India will be purely electric. On the stationary side, government is expecting that by 2030, Indian grid will have total installed generation capacity of around 800 gigawatt, out of which around 50-53% will be from solar and wind. So India is expecting to get from around 175 gigawatt, which is the target for 2025, to more than 400 gigawatt of renewables by 2030, based on the current plans of national government. There is also tremendous demand for consumer electronics, including cell phones, power banks, laptops, and other applications. And also there are some strategic demand getting created for sectors like railways and defense through government policies. So as part of this program, there are various incentives being proposed for companies who look at setting up giga-scale cell manufacturing. The minimum size of this would be somewhere around 5 5 gigawatt hour to qualify for receiving these incentives under this special program. At the same time, some of the standard benefits such as investment tax credits or facilitation of manufacturing projects will be provided to even other factories, but there is a specific $20 to $30 per kilowatt hour cash incentive which will be provided to first 50 gigawatt hour of manufacturing, which gets set between now and 2023. So there is going to be a specific selection criteria for choosing this. There is a concern from industry about actually demand creation for some of the advanced batteries. So NITI Aayog has been working with World Bank. Earlier last year, World Bank has proposed to use a $1 billion concessional facility for increasing demand for energy storage in India. This is expected to get released in 4 tranches of 250 million each. And already World Bank and NITI Aayog are starting the process of looking at some of the strategic opportunities such as energy storage for renewable integration and diesel minimization to accelerate this market adoption. Government also understands that since electricity is a dual jurisdiction in India similar to US, only central government cannot do everything. So NITI Aayog has already issued a grand challenge for various states who are looking at both creating demand for energy storage electric vehicles as well as they are looking at attracting investments in this sector. So NITI Aayog is currently working with around 6 to 10 states who have shown interest in having specific energy storage and electric vehicle manufacturing and demand creation policies. And NITI Aayog will be running this challenge so that any company who comes in for setting up gigafactories in India can have a single window clearance both from central government as well as state governments to try to accelerate the process in India. On the demand creation, there are various initiatives being taken with different ministries such as Ministry of Power, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, state distribution companies, Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Urban Development, Ministry of Defense. So again, I won't go into the details in the interest of time, but there is a very strong background work which is happening right now. So in case if you are wondering what happens between some of the announcements which came earlier part of this year and now, there is a lot of work happening behind the scenes, especially by NITI Aayog in trying to facilitate this. So in terms of the timeline, already since the March approval, we have crossed 6 months, and now the final document is ready for cabinet approval. As I mentioned, it is expected anytime this month. They may do additional 2 or 3 weeks of final consultation for tweaking the actual RFP, which is expected to get released anytime in November or maybe early December. And then there will be 3 to 4 months of selection process where India is expected to choose anywhere from 3 to 10 manufacturing proposals for setting up minimum 5 gigawatt hour up to 20 gigawatt hour of manufacturing facilities, which will be eligible to get that $20 to $30 per kilowatt hour of incentive. In fact, in the latest proposal for some of the advanced batteries which can go beyond 350 watt hour per kg energy density or more than 10,000 cycles, the highest level of incentive could be available up to $60 if you are able to do 100% value addition in India. But even if you are doing only 70% value addition in India, you would be able to get more than $40 per kilowatt hour as a cash incentive for manufacturing those batteries in India under this program. So I'm almost out of time. So I'll just quickly give a quick background about IESA, which was launched in 2012 to create awareness about energy storage and EVs in India. We have currently increased our mission to make India a global hub for R&D and manufacturing of energy storage, microgrid, and e-mobility solutions. And we are very proud to have a number of international partners, including ESA, which was actually the first international strategic partnerships we had signed back in 2012. IESA is your gateway for understanding and staying up to date on policies, programs, as well as projects in India. We have a very vibrant community of more than 90 members, which are spread across the continent. We started with, for the initial couple of years, more members coming from actually international companies, but as the domestic market is developing, now there are more than 65 companies out of 90 companies are from India, with 4 leadership circle members. And there are a number of initiatives which we have taken, such as micro initiative for accelerating energy access, iLab initiative for working on improving lead acid battery issues. We have an initiative MOVE, which is focusing on electric vehicles. We have just recently launched a new initiative for reuse and recycling initiative of the advanced batteries, particularly with focus on lithium-ion recycling. And also we have been focusing on creating safety and standards similar to the efforts which ESA is doing in US. Through IESA, all the members get a direct access to all the key stakeholder meetings where over the last 5 years, we have been part of all the key committees set up by government for shaping up the policies. So, and usually the inputs provided by IESA are listened to by all the key government officials. And we also do various conferences and events throughout the year to create and build a community and generate demand for these advanced solutions. As part of this, we also do a magazine called Emerging Technology News, as well as we have a podcast called Emerging Technology Radio, which is available free of cost at various platforms. And if you are interested in knowing more about the India market, then we have 2 reports for stationary storage as well as e-mobility report, which are included for IESA members as part of their membership. But if you are not a member or not yet, or just want to know about the market, you can purchase those separately from IESA as well. So with this, I would like to open up for any questions which you may have. Thank you very much. I hope you will consider the opportunities presented by the Indian market very seriously and get actively involved in exploring these opportunities, because US is a very key strategic partner for India, and there is a lot of positive synergies, and we would love to see how we can help various ESA members to benefit from these emerging opportunities in India. Thank you very much, Tom. I'll hand it back to you.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Rahul. Very informative. A reminder that folks can submit questions via the chat box, but I'll start us off here. So as I understand it, India has effectively a federal system with states and a national government that would look somewhat familiar to an American audience. To what extent are state policies driving storage deployment? Are there certain states that are pushing harder and seeing more progress as a result?
Well, that's an excellent question, Tom. Yes, in fact, similar to US, India has this dual jurisdiction where central government can issue certain policies, but ultimately states can also influence these policies quite a lot exactly on how they are implemented. So yes, there are states such as Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, which are driving some of these policies, particularly from renewable integration as well as electric vehicle adoption. So right now we have around 6 states who have specifically come up with energy storage and EV policies. There are these states who are also taking leadership in increasing adoption for electric vehicles, where they have introduced certain special tariff categories for electric vehicles, as well as they are allocating money for specifically the state-owned transportation companies to adopt electric buses. There are around 14 states which have been selected by under the FAME2 program to receive cash subsidies for deploying more than 5,800 electric buses in India, which will happen within next 2 years. So the first phase of procurement has already started. Just last week, Gujarat announced the winner of the tender for 300 electric buses, which was the largest tender so far. Also, there are certain central government agencies such as EESL, Energy Efficiency Services Limited, which has had amazing success in terms of helping India move on from incandescent and CFLs to LED bulbs over the last 3 years. So now they have started getting involved in helping states in deploying electric vehicle charging infrastructure as well as financing electric vehicles. They had issued a tender a couple of years back for doing central procurement for 10,000 electric vehicles. So far they have done only around 1,500 of those vehicles because of some of the limitations of vehicles available on ground and the user expectations. But agencies like EESL are working very closely with various state agencies, as well as now they have started to get in with working with private entities such as cab aggregators, where they can finance some of these procurements through various concessional financing with international banks or donor agencies and help accelerate the market in India.
Great, thanks. Folks, of course, can submit questions here via the chat box. So I understand the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Resources, Francis Fannin, was just in India last week, I think, to discuss collaborations around clean energy issues to support economic growth in India. How do these sorts of international collaborations and development programs drive markets in India? And are they having any impact on government policies or programs?
Sure, that's again a very important aspect, and these type of partnerships are very, very important for the Indian government. They are expected a lot to happen through these type of partnerships, particularly in terms of leapfrogging or improving understanding of some of the deployment issues, rather than India trying to go through the same phase of doing pilots and then studying it for 2 years and then increasing deployment. So as IESA, we have been trying to encourage Indian government to send various decision makers to developed countries such as US and use these partnership opportunities to learn not just on the technology side but also on the policy side and help improve the adoption. At the same time, in last couple of years, we had certain times these type of collaborations have also backfired. Particularly, there were certain studies which were done through these type of partnerships where different international agencies had different mandates, where actually some of these studies ended up coming and suggesting that India should not look at energy storage, and storage was not commercial technology so far, and India should focus on just using thermal plants for balancing the renewables. So in some cases, actually, in fact, as IESA, we had to fight back against some of these international collaborative reports which came from US or Germany, trying to actually derail some of the faster adoption in India. But on the positive side, we expect there is actually a lot more synergies, and once even these international efforts are focused around energy storage, it can have a very positive synergy. But we again request all the ESA members, if you are interested in these, do talk to your local agencies whenever they are doing such type of multinational collaboration efforts with India, because the message which gets passed on through such intergovernmental partnership can have both positive as well as negative impact based on what gets said. So we definitely need to have a much more stronger collaboration between the efforts which done by ESA in US and also some of these international efforts happening in places like India.
Great, thanks so much. We're drawing near the top of the hour, but briefly, have we seen much interest in using storage in microgrids to power underserved rural communities at all? Is that a market that seems to have potential?
Sure. So this is the area where there is a lot of potential. At the same time, as I mentioned during my remarks, in last 2 years, Indian government has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in trying to expand the electric grid. So some of the standalone microgrid market size has been cut down very drastically in last few years. At the same time, we are seeing now an interest in sort of grid-connected microgrids. So in fact, under the MOVE initiative, we are working with 3-4 distribution utilities to try to explore how they can actually use grid-connected microgrid for addressing the grid reliability, because Indian government has set a target of having 24/7 power made available to every citizen by 2021. And most of the distribution companies are realizing that ensuring 24/7 reliability for end-of-the-line customers in the remote areas is going to cost them lots more. So we think there is a tremendous opportunity for deploying distributed solar coupled with batteries in terms of grid-connected microgrids in such areas. In fact, we have just recently completed a one-year partnership project with European Space Agency, where we looked at role of satellite-based tools and data for improving microgrid design and providing value-added services for these microgrids, where we have looked into business cases apart from providing access to lighting and cell phone charging, also how these tools can enable telemedicine or teleeducation and help in actually transforming some of these remote areas. So there is a lot of potential, and we see the kind of work which is happening in US with New York REV or some of the efforts in California or Hawaii. They can actually generate a lot of interest in not just looking at energy storage for these remote areas, but in India there are more than 300 private townships getting built with an expected load of anywhere from 10 to 100 megawatt each. And most of these townships are made in a greenfield areas with almost around a few 100,000 people living in these townships. So those itself can become excellent use cases for campus microgrids and help people get more greener power as well as provide better power quality for some of these residents in these newer townships. So there are a lot of opportunities in that area.
Excellent. Thanks so much. One last question here from in the room. Go ahead.
Yes. Thanks, Tom. Rahul, thank you for your presentation. You had a slide on the solar and energy storage players today that have been kind of active. Could you give a little color on the competition specific to the battery storage technology? And, who do you see potentially as big players that are, building up their capabilities in India?
Sure. So this is an area where India traditionally has been dominated by lead acid industry, similar to even in US, where most of the people do not realize, but lead acid is a dominating technology apart from pumped hydro on the US electric grid as well. In India, we see lithium-ion as emerging as the fastest technology, although there are some projects also coming up with flow batteries or metal air batteries such as aluminum air or zinc air being tried out. And if they are coupled with some manufacturing, then they can become a major player in India. But otherwise, based on the current business as usual scenario, we expect lithium-ion as the most dominant chemistry emerging in the sector. Within lithium-ion, we are seeing the initial deployments largely were from chemistries from lithium iron phosphate, and right now the market is getting dominated by Asian majors, particularly from China and Korea. But we do see a lot of interest from US players such as Tesla and others, and they are evaluating these markets closely. Once I think there is a stronger grid scale market emerges, I expect a lot of international players, including Japanese companies, to step up their efforts in India. But right now, in terms of the deployment, majority of the technology deployment is going to either Chinese or Korean companies in terms of companies like CATL or BYD or Narada from China, or for stationary applications, or companies like LG or Samsung for some of the applications, including EV partnerships with key OEMs.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Well, that brings us to the end of our hour. Before we conclude today's webinar, again, not too late to register for ESA Storage Exchange powered by EPRI next week. You can even meet Rahul there. And with that, thank you, Rahul, for joining us what is relatively late in the evening your time, and to everyone else around the world. in whatever time zone you might be. Thanks for joining us. Everyone will be receiving links to the recording as well as a PDF of the slides. Look out for those in your email. And we hope you can join us on a future ESA webinar. So with that, goodbye. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.